Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Stewart, and welcome to part 3 of the insect update for the 2021 cotton focus. If you've been viewing these in sequence, we've already talked about thrips management and plant bug management. This video, which promises to be the shortest of the three probably, we're going to talk about bollworm management. Again, I'm Scott Stewart. I'm the director at the West Tennessee Research and Education Center. But previous to that, I was the extension entomologist at this same location, and it's fallen on me to do these updates, which I'm happy to do so. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump right into this. So if things are going according to plan, you're looking at the first slide here. And again, this is part 3. If you haven't seen the other ones, you should be able to look them up, provide little updates on thrips, plant bug, and bollworm management, which of course are the big 3 in Tennessee that we traditionally have to deal with year in and year out in cotton. So I'm going to first talk about the bollworm moth flight. Keep in mind the bollworm is also the corn earworm. So a lot of our moth flight is actually driven by corn because they start in corn and then emerge from corn and move to cotton. We have good data and good experience that teaches us that. One thing I've noticed in recent years, and 2020 was no exception, is that our moth flight's been a little bit lower and later. Now, so if you look at the graph on the left, this is weekly average moth catches in our traps. And we have about, I think, 17 traps we run weekly throughout West Tennessee during the year. And you can see in 2020, we didn't have much of a moth flight until we got into mid-August. If you look to the right, you're actually looking at the moth flight from 2004 to 2011. That's your black line compared to 2012 through 2020. And that shows essentially the same thing. We're seeing a little bit of a lag and a suppression in our corn earworm or bollworm moth flight. And I think that relates to corn. I can't prove this, but we know beginning about 2012, a lot of our growers started adopting the 2-gene BT corns. Those BT corns don't do great at controlling corn earworms in those ears, but they do delay their development substantially. And so what I think we're seeing is some mortality, but mostly just a delay in the development of our corn earworm population in corn until those same corn earworm moths fly into our cotton. So let's jump right into some 2020 experiences and talk about BT technology, because 99% of our growers are growing BT cotton, and that cotton provides substantial protection from caterpillar pests. We don't even think about things like tobacco budworm and beet armyworm anymore, but they're not bulletproof, especially against the corn earworm. So what you're looking at in this slide is a test of different BT technologies that was done at the center here in Jackson. Now, keep in mind in 2020, even on this late planted cotton, we had relatively low infestation that didn't last very long, and it was kind of late as well. The graph on the left is showing you how these technologies performed when no insecticides were applied. So the first 3 bars that you really don't even see a bar there are Twin Link Plus, Wide Strike 3, and Bollguard 3 technologies. These are the 3-gene technologies that contain this VIP trait. That VIP trait really shores up control of corn earworm, and in fact, we found no injury at all in those 3-gene technologies. Now, it's a little bit of injury in Bollguard 2. In the past years, we've seen more injury than this. This Bollguard 2 has 2 technologies, Cry1 and Cry2. We have documentation, and we know that we have corn earworm or bollworm resistance to those technologies, but it's not complete resistance. It's just enough resistance that it doesn't always work as well. Under these conditions and light pressure, we really wouldn't have needed to make an insecticide application. Now, you'll notice in the non-BT cotton, without any BT technology, we had substantial fruit damage, 25% fruit damage during that short 7 to 10 day window. On the right, you're looking at the same technologies where Prevathon was applied, actually twice very aggressively. That wouldn't have been necessary in this case. I think we would have seen the same result with 1 insecticide application. The point here is that we can take these diamide insecticides like Prevathon and Besiege and do an excellent job of reducing corn earworm or bollworm infestations, even in non-BT cotton, provided you make those applications in a timely manner. So I want to show the yield data from this test. This is for comparison of the yield in each technology, either sprayed with Prevathon or not sprayed with Prevathon. So the different colors represent different varieties. And of course, we see differences among the yield of different varieties. But the real take home point here is we didn't really need to spray Prevathon. We saw no advantage of making that Prevathon application to BT technologies. The only place we did see an advantage was on the non-BT technology there at the bottom. In that case, even with this relatively light and late corn earworm infestation, we saw about an 800-pound loss in seed cotton per acre if we didn't make these Prevathon applications. And that's pretty substantial and significant. So I've mentioned that there's going to be occasions, certainly on non-BT cotton, but on Bollworm 2 technology, for example, where we're going to have to spray BT cotton with an insecticide for the management of bollworm. So the question is, what's best? We've got a pretty good data set on this across the cotton belt and in Tennessee, and we really already know what's best. We know that the diamide insecticides like Besiege and Prevathon provide the best control. Not only good immediate knockdown, not perfect knockdown, but good knockdown, but residual control. The diamide insecticides like Besiege, like Prevathon, I feel very confident in saying are providing about 2 weeks of residual control or more, depending on the rates. So what you're looking at in this test is boll damage on the left and seed cotton on the right. From that same test is an evaluation of different insecticides and different rates to see what we can really get by with, I guess is the best way of looking at it. So again, we know that products that contain Prevathon, that contain Besiege, are going to tend to be better. And that's exactly what we found in 2020. Again, relatively late, relatively low moth pressure, but the best treatments in the test contained the diamide insecticides. Not a lot of statistical separation in this particular test, but we've seen this over the years. Intrepid Edge doesn't do well, particularly well even at the highest rate, and it's similarly cost to the diamide insecticides. Now, one treatment of interest to you up there should be the ½ pound of orthene plus the pyrethroid, in this case, a full rate of bifenthrin insecticide. Should point out all these insecticides reduced boll damage. Not really a big difference among these treatments. And in this particular case, if you shift your eyes to the right and you look at the yield, we really could get by with some different and less effective treatments in 2020 versus considering this was a relatively light year. So one of my take-home points on the next slide is use a diamide insecticide. But I do think there are exceptions when the infestation is very late in the season. I don't think that's necessarily needed. What I've seen with the treatment of acephate and bifenthrin is it performs very similarly to Prevathon or Besiege for about a week. After that point, they pretty dramatically start separating, where the Prevathon and Besiege is going to continue to give you good control, and the acephate and the pyrethroid combination is not. So with that, some of my take-home points for this section, this video is, I think we can continue to expect our bollworm moth flight to be a little bit smaller than and later in the upcoming years. But of course, we have a lot of year-to-year variation, and so I think you just need to stay tuned. We do know that we have resistance to Cry1 and Cry2 proteins. That means we're going to be more likely to have to spray the BT technologies, particularly Bollgard 2. And if there happens to be any twin link or wide strike technologies out there, the older technologies out there, them as well. Right now, my expectation is we would not have to spray the 3-gene technologies very often, if at all. But the exception proves the rule. There's been exceptions across the belt, so we would continue to recommend that you scout your BT cotton for corn earworm at this time. I just think it's most likely that the only BT technology you're going to be spraying are the older technologies. If you do have to make those applications, use the diamide insecticides, Prevathon, Besiege, any other premixes that come out that contain those same active ingredients. In Tennessee, my experience is we can get by with lower rates. As you go further south, you'll hear my counterparts have a different talking point on this. They'll talk more about 20 ounces of Prevathon or 10 ounces of Besiege. And in their more southern environment, earlier onset of corn earworm, they're often having to make 2 applications. So they're starting with the higher rates and hoping they don't have to make that application. In Tennessee, my experience has been if we time it right, we typically can get by with 1 application at a lower rate of Prevathon, 14 to 16 ounces of Prevathon, 7 to 8 ounces of Besiege. And that's simply because our corn earworm or bollworm infestation is starting late enough that we only need about 2 weeks residual control, and we're not seeing much separation between the low and high rates of Prevathon and Besiege during that time frame. Again, there is some limited opportunity to go cheap in specific circumstances or situations, but I wouldn't let my mind go there first. That would be very specific to certain circumstances. With that, like my previous other 2 videos, I want to push our online resources. And in this video, I want to really highlight the UT Crop News blog. I think it's very timely information. It's essentially real-time information. You can sign up and receive a weekly newsletter, or you can just follow us on Twitter or go to that website at your leisure. But it's really important to keep up with current events. When we're having a big moth flight or an unusually low moth flight, that's going to be reviewed and summarized on that website. With that, I want to thank everybody, and I also want to take a minute, as I probably should have on the previous videos, to thank Cotton Incorporated and the growers of Tennessee that fund Cotton Incorporated, because it's this funding that helps us do these kind of trials, not only in Tennessee, but on a regional basis, and we really do appreciate that support. Thanks, and everybody have a nice day.